Next, we invite the America-Israel Cultural Foundation and its executive director, David Homan.
Great. Thank you all for having us here. For 74 years, the America-Israel Cultural Foundation has supported everything you know about its Israeli culture. Itzhak Perlman, Pinchas Zuckerman, Ohad Naharin, the Israel Philharmonic, the Israel Museum, everything that we consume internationally that has anything to do with Israel comes first from us focusing on children. What we believe is if you give a child a chance and the dream, the success, the money, and the mentorship to succeed, you will be paid back in spades. When asked to speak about what my vision of Israel was, it was actually an ironic thought I had, because my vision for Israel is that everyone would actually understand what already exists internationally in terms of the celebration of Israel and the celebration of Israeli culture. This is something that I see day to day because we have supported 16,000 artists and 600 cultural institutions. It's more than $150 million of support where everyone focuses on Israel and Israel in isolation. And what we see and what I see every day is Israel in nearly every single country in the world in a dominant way. Israel in Chile, where Asaf Leibowitz, the first clarinetist of the National Orchestra of Santiago, played for the Chilean miners. Mika Rovner in France, at the Louvre, where first she was initially not looked at favorably because France has become more and more anti-Semitic, and by the end of the art exhibition, the head curator did a press conference, and Michal was asked after this to consider doing a project based on the children of Auschwitz. There is something very powerful in the arts that crosses all borders and boundaries, and Israel already has a dominant role. Our vision is to invest in the children and to provide all of our alumni the means to connect together and to share something that's not in isolation with each other, but in collaboration with thousands of artists from every country around the world.
Thank you. So this past May, I was in Israel for the opening of the new center that the Israel Philharmonic plays in. And what was striking about it was that this is a world-class orchestra that had a second-class hall. That, in fact, what was said was that they couldn't really hear their music in the country that they're from. They could only hear it when they came to New York or Berlin or any other place in the world that had invested in the cultural talent of their community. Does the America-Israel Foundation have anything to do with promoting Israeli culture in Israel? And do you see that culture as being well supported not only on the Jewish side of the country, but on the Palestinian side as well?
Okay, two questions.
Yes.
Okay. The Israel Philharmonic, Habima, Kamari Theaters, the dominant cultural organizations in Israel have more people per capita seeing that culture than New York does. A quick statistic, of 8 million New Yorkers, 500,000 see theater on Broadway a year, and of 7 million Israelis, 5 million see at least one show a year. So there is a cultural acceptance that crosses all areas. There are festivals like the Akko Theater Festival that reach into areas where most Jews in the US couldn't even figure out where Akko is. So there is an acceptance there. There is not funding in the arts in Israel yet. It is a very small portion, but there are certain leading philanthropists that do it. And even in the American and Canadian Jewry, it's still a very, very small percentage, but it's substantive because more and more there's an understanding of what the impact arts can be beyond arts for art's sake. And that's where we promote Israeli culture in Israel. But we don't focus in Israel or the US, which is what our previous mission was. Our focus now has become what Israel can be seen internationally, and therefore you might actually go to Israel, experience something else, and enjoy it more.
And my second question about the Jews and Palestinians and art.
It's a balance where the arts sort of transcend that. There's an amazing school in Nazareth where the majority of the teachers are Israeli and the majority of the artists are Arab and Arab Israeli. And these musicians play together, and there's no division, there's no boundary, and they play in small villages where some people haven't even met Israeli Jews. But they play in a way that it's about the music and it's about their friend. It's not about where they come from. So there's a growing understanding of what in Arab society in Israel affects Israeli society, but it has been very, very disjointed. But part of what the recession did here and in Israel was merge a lot of these groups more closely together, because the arts are always going to struggle. So when everyone else was struggling, we had a great day because it was easier to understand.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. And next we'll hear from Elise Bernhard, who's the president and CEO of the Foundation for Jewish Culture. Hello.
So I'm a little jet lagged because I just got back from Israel. So that starts. And then I have to do the disclaimer for those of you who read the Jewish press. No, we are not dead yet. The Foundation for Jewish Culture is winding down. It's a long story. Somebody asked me if it was because we supported the law in these parts. I was like, no, that has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the communal Jewish system. And it's a longer story, which I won't tell you now because I want to focus on Israel. And I have to remember, so I can start where I left off, which was that we are in the middle of the American Academy in Jerusalem. And I'm going to out my friend David Karnofsky, who was in the 2011 class. You could ask him about it. Our fellows are 5 weeks in. There's a visual artist, a filmmaker, a choreographer, and an architect. They're teaching at Bezalel in the Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance. And one of them, and this is really kind of interesting, for those of you who've been to the Center for Jewish History, Diane Samuels has that beautiful wall of Jerusalem stone. And she is creating a work in her very, very, very tiny handwriting. And she's collecting stories from people about home. And she works every day in situ at Imka, YMCA, for those of you who know Jerusalem, across from the King David Hotel. And every single day she's there about 6 hours, and she's working on her work, and people come and talk to her. And of course, Imka is the place where Arabs and Jews and Christians tend to feel reasonably comfortable together. And the work that she's doing with poetry and people is pretty amazing, because one of the outgrowths is that the head of the preschool decided that she would use the theme of home as a way to bring together these Arab and Jewish families. And so Diane's art creation has spawned a whole other community enterprise. I should probably go to the next slide. Which is about the Jewish Documentary Film Fund. We've funded 92 films over the last 13 or 14 years, and many of them have been seen here. And they range from the history of the kibbutz, Inventing Our Life by Toby Pearl-Freilich, to The Law in These Parts, which you should all see. It's about the judges in the occupied territories and everything more or less in between. And 6 points, emerging Jewish artists. Yeah, we do support Israeli artists because they're really good. And I just want to give props to David for saving his organization in a really difficult time, because I'm pretty sure many of our artists were early supportees, were supported early in their careers. It is it is such a saturation of culture there, and there is something in the water, and part of it is the tension and the conflict that comes out. And I guess the last thing I want to say is that we just had, I'm running out of time, but we were at the educational bookshop in East Jerusalem last week. We do salons with our fellows. And it was a really complicated, difficult thing to organize. It turned out to be a very wonderful gathering of artists of different disciplines. But it is harder and harder to bring people together. And that is something that we're all going to have to figure out what to do about.
So, Elise, if I could ask you to just tell our audience one artist that you think, an emerging artist, that we shouldn't miss. I'd like your opinion.
Oh, that's so unfair.
I know.
Where'd Oded Hirsch? Oded Hirsch is now in the collection of the Israel Museum. He did a triptych, which was shown at a gallery here in New York, and it will probably be seen again. He works with his kibbutz family, which is a very extended family. His father's a quadriplegic, and he is always a sort of a featured member of his films. And the kibbutz members are both the cast and the crew. And there's something just really transcendent about the work, and that it comes so much out of that place.
Thank you. Remember that name.
And
Okay.
read Ari Shavit's book. I just want to give props
Another
to yeah.
Tom Friedman plug. Read Ari Shavit's book. Thank you, Elise. And since I probably won't have another public opportunity to thank you for the magnificent work that the foundation has done under your leadership, I think Elise deserves a round of applause for that work.